We never lost faith in prison camp. That's one thing I noticed. People always looked forward to something better.
The civilian death toll of the Second World War was horrendous and devastating. Up to 60 million civilians died, including 6 million Jews in concentration camps, and another 28 million civilians who died from war-related disease and famine.
This was near the end of the war, when we were in Eindhoven, Holland. We were listening to we had a little small radio, and we got Arnhem Mary on the radio, and she said, "We understand there's a Canadian squadron in Eindhoven, Holland." And she said, "This is not your war. You should go home, but you know, we feel so sad for you fellas, but maybe we could come over and wish you Merry Christmas." So we all laughed, thought that was a big joke. Next morning, there was 35 German aircraft over us at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was down having a shave when they passed over, and I thought it was our aircraft taking off. I went out and I looked, and I was still shaving. I said, "Boy, aren't they low? Boy, golly, they're so low. Holy smokes, they're not ours." And so they damaged the entire field. But anyways, we were all out there after they left, and the planes are burning, and one of our fellas who really wasn't hit badly, but he had enough blood on his face, he said, "Take my picture, I want to send it home to my wife." So I said, "Come over by this aircraft and I'll take your picture." I was never under guns firing at me, except that one day I showed you the pictures where we were strafed. I was scared, I cried, I fell down, busted my chin, and all the guys were telling me to get into the slit trench. I was really scared. I had to say, "But you're lucky, you're not carrying a gun and you're not 100 miles up there. You're 100 miles back here and nobody's firing guns at you. Those guys are getting killed, so shut up." And I have to insist, I was in a war, but I really wasn't in a war. The guy that was on the front lines or landing or shooting guns was a war. But I was in a war, and I grew up.
I was just a kid when I first flew this Lancaster. Now I feel 95 years old. War does make men out of boys. Problem is, there are some who refuse to grow up, and that can be their downfall.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, boys your age feel indestructible, like nothing's gonna hurt them, and they take foolish risks.
Doesn't taking foolish risks sometimes win medals?
But more often than not, you lose a limb, an eye, or even your life. You have to be smart in war, and that only comes with experience.
So who should fight wars? Wise old men?
No. It'll be you. Young men fight wars, Cadet.
Maybe not.
Come again?
You see, just like how the Second World War was light years ahead of the First World War, wars today are too. Soon, technology might just remove humans off the battlefield altogether.
I forget our target that night. I think our target was Merseburg, an oil refinery near Leipzig. And we dropped our bombs, and it was about half an hour afterwards we were shot down. It happened very quick, and I was just lucky. I really shouldn't have got out, really, because I was supposed to go at the front end of the aircraft, and the bomb aimer and the engineer were supposed to go ahead of me, but they couldn't get the darn hatch open. So I said to myself, well, I'm not going to get out that way. So I went back and stood behind the pilot. One of the windows, right there, about that size, just blew open. I pulled myself up, jumped out, I pulled the parachute, and the first thing I know is floating in the air at about 20,000 feet. And the parachute worked perfectly. First thing you know, I was floating up, and my first impression was I was going up, but gradually I could see I was going down. And I was a bit concerned because I could hear the fighter planes still flying around. I thought maybe he'd give me a burst, but he didn't. He ignored me, I think. And then I landed in trees. And they captured me, and so they took me to a farmer's house. A very nice farmer. This farmer, luckily, he could speak English, but he was so nice fellow to talk to. And so what I wanted to give him my watch and my wallet, because I didn't want the Germans to get it. And he said, oh no, he says, I can't take that. He says, if I took that and the Gestapo come in there and found that on me, he says, they wouldn't ask any questions. He said, they'd just shoot me. He was scared of the Gestapo, so scared. But anyway, he was very nice to me, and I laughed. He says, what you need is a drink of schnapps. I said, do you think so? Yeah. So he went and got the bottle of schnapps, and he handed me I had never drank schnapps before. I took it myself. I said, that's too strong. He said, oh no, he took one, he drank it himself. The next morning, the local burgermeister came and took me, and they took me to jail. But first, before they went to the jail, they took me to where the plane had crashed, and they told me then that all the other 6 guys were dead. They put 2 guards on me and took me to the railway station at Frankfurt. And from there, I was going to the interrogation center at Dulag Luft. And when we were in the railway station, there was an air raid on. And of course, all the people were running in and going to the air raid shelter. And we had to go down steps to get to the shelter. And as we were going in, the people coming in, they could see me, and I could tell by the look on their faces they weren't too happy. They looked at me and they said, oh, terror figure, you know. And of course, some of these people, I can see their point. A lot of them had been bombed before and maybe lost relatives, and they wouldn't be thinking too highly of me. So what these two guards did, they put me in a corner and they stood in front of me so the people couldn't see me as they went down the steps. And we got out of there without incidents. And when the air raid was over, we got on a small train, I think, and went to the interrogation center, which was very close to Frankfurt. There was one young German officer. He spoke very good English. He got very upset, and he more or less threatened me. But the Geneva Convention said that all we need to tell him was our name, our number, and our rank. And that's all I told him, and stuck to that. But I could tell by the way he was talking, he knew a lot more about our squadron than maybe I thought I knew myself. The food was terrible. But you must remember at that time, Germany had no food. They were right down to rock bottom. Even the general public was starving too. When you're hungry, you'll eat anything. I remember once when we were on the march, I got into this farmhouse. I don't know how I did, but I got, and there was a trough there, and the pigs were eating this stuff. I looked at it, and I picked it up, it looked pretty good, so I thought I'd have some. So I ate some, it was really good. Of course, I have a nature of rather being, looking on the bright side, of seeing the humor of things. And maybe that's what got me through the war, I don't know.
I don't get it. How can anyone keep positive while fighting in a war?
Let me see if I can explain it to you. We go through different hells all the time in war. And when an act of kindness from a fellow soldier or civilian or even the enemy happens, it reminds us that we're all human, still capable of compassion. And that's something positive, don't you think?
I think the most positive thing would be not to kill one another.
Tough to do in war.
I'd say about the third year into the war, when we started to feel the pins. You go to the soup kitchen, you get a spoonful of mostly soup. It's kind of. Have you ever seen a rotten potato? Try to eat that. Yeah, and that was the soup made of wheat flour. If you ever seen if it is years old or a couple of years old, maggots will form in there, and this is what they made porridge out. So I had a goldfish, and I was eating on the kitchen table, and the kids, hey, we were eating anything. The Germans had set off on the bridges to prevent people from going to the farmers. Well, they let people go out, and then when they caught in the beginning, and when they came back with the bicycle bags full of, you know, milk, the potatoes, whatever. You had some vegetables in 43 about. They were stopping them on the bridges. They take the food, drop it over the bridge in the water. Well, he was starving. Yeah, that was mean. My mother was about 230 pounds when the war started. She was 98 pounds when the war finished. And it would have been a matter of a week, 14 days, that she wouldn't have made it.
What we do to each other in times of war is disgusting. To starve people who want no part of the war is just cruel.
Yeah, it's cruel. Horrible things happen in war all the time. They bomb us, we bomb them. They sink our ships, we sink theirs. They kill our soldiers, we kill theirs. They shoot down our planes.
We shoot down theirs.
shoot
I
down-
get it. I get it.
It's a vicious circle.
Yeah. Yeah. One that goes around and around.
One thing I did do, I'm quite proud of it too, and it really makes me feel good when I think of it. We went over and the Dutch were starving. We took food over and dropped it to them.
The Germans had said that they wouldn't send up any fighters or anything. They allowed us to go in and drop the food. And as we flew over Rotterdam, coming to the drop zone, the hundreds of people were all lined up, and they were waving at us. We dropped our food and wiggled our wings and set sail for home. So I think they really appreciated that.
It didn't take long for people to catch on. The big apartment buildings, they were on the roofs and waving. The nice part was, you know, if you see the Lancaster airplane, at the tail end, you see those guns? And he was waving with his guns, double guns.
The Dutch people were wonderful. They would come up to you on the street. Of course, we wore our berets and everything. They knew who we were. They'd come up and give you a hug, kiss you and everything else. Makes me cry just to think about it. Anyway, you'd go into a restaurant sometimes and they wouldn't even charge you. Wonderful people. And they really liked the Canadians.
So even in war, bitter enemies can do the right thing, do something good for each other?
Yeah, but usually it comes at a cost.
Shouldn't be that way, though. Doing something good should come with no strings attached.
What? world you live in. Eventually, everything comes at a cost in this life.
I received a first letter from my mother. Everything is fine except your father and my youngest brother disappeared. Later on, I found out that they were killed in Auschwitz concentration camp.
And we got to a place called Belsen. There was a German concentration camp. We went into this concentration camp as we were allowed to do. And to make us safe in there, because there was typhus in the camp, they sprayed us with a white powder, which turned out to be DDT. And they put it down our clothes, they put it in our hair, they put it all over us and so on. What we saw in there was very traumatic. The people, mostly Jewish, prisoners that have been in there, were thin people dying. Somebody walking along and just fall over. But we saw these, what was there? And I never forgot that, never. I hated the Germans. I hated it with an intensity.
I didn't know about what happened. I really didn't. I have never seen anybody doing something bad like that. I couldn't imagine it. But then, of course, I had to realize it as the truth. They showed us the pictures, and it is terrible. It should never have happened, and I cannot understand who's doing that. It's horrible. It's horrible.
When I got home, when I found my daughter was doing tracing the family tree and so on back, then what does she find out? And more German in me than than British, English, or Scotch, or French. Big joke.
We're all cut from the same cloth. How can fellow human beings have so little regard for life? How can someone send people into a gas chamber? What will it take to change things?
I'm just a pawn in this war, Andy. I don't know. A miracle? You tell me.
Oh, we were celebrating when we, that evening, everybody was so happy, and the civilians were rejoicing. They were hoping that the rations would be over and they could start living again. Everybody was excited, yeah.
There was excitement in the air. Well, there was over here too, and you know, the people in Montreal went crazy. The churches were all filled, and yeah, meant it was the end of our being away is what it mostly meant to us. Yeah.
On our base, in our part of Gander, I don't recall even knowing the war was over, so there definitely was no great celebration because we were still doing shift work. The planes were still coming and going.
The people in Ottawa all congregated downtown for a huge rally celebrating the end of the war. It was packed downtown. Guys were drinking beer, and the guys in the uniform and all this, and the women were kissing the guys in the uniform, and all this kind of nonsense. And of course, all the beer parlors and that were loaded, you know. And it went on all night long, yeah. There was an awful lot of hangovers the next day.
So I'm alone in this big Nissan hut, all on my own. And it's VE Day, you know. I can still remember that to this day. And I'm being very sorry for myself, being stuck in this Nissan hut and nobody there but me. So I just went to bed.
I think we're still celebrating. A lot of dancing, street dancing were all over. That lasted a couple of weeks, actually, the Canadian soldiers. And that was all in street squares, and they were out with the bands and playing, yeah. That went on for a long time.
All I remember is that there's no flying. Oh, well, now what do I do? There's no flying. Holy crow.